So this video is going to be a little bit different than my normal videos. So I don't normally even introduce myself, but my name is Meredith and I am a seamstress and a shoemaker, and I make all sorts of other things as well. And I've had a few people ask me recently how I specifically got into sewing and shoemaking. So I figured I would kind of answer those questions here. So that way, if anyone else is curious in the future, they know where to find that information. So first I'm going to start with sewing, because sewing is kind of, I call it my primary craft. It's like the thing that I will always do. It's integral to my personality and who I am as a person. So it's something that I will do forever and always. So with sewing, I actually started getting into sewing when I was a child. My mom owned her own business, and there was a day when I was like hanging out there, and she had like these big pieces of fabric that she would use for displays. And one day I just took it upon myself to cut one of those up and turn it into a robe, which was like, my very crude interpretation of what I thought a robe was when I was like, 8 or 9 years old. And so from there, my mom was like, well, do you want to learn how to sew? And I was like, yes, definitely. And my mom and my grandmother both sewed as well. So my mom already had my grandmother's sewing machine, which I actually still have now, and I have since gotten it completely refurbished, and it is a Singer featherweight, which I didn't know anything about Singer featherweights until a couple of years ago, and then I happened to look at that machine, and that's what it was. So I'm really lucky that that's the kind of machine that it is. If you don't know anything about Singer featherweights, look it up. But that's the kind of machine that I learned on. And because my mom had sewn before, she had like a stash of fabric and some like vintage patterns that she had used when she was learning. So her and I together went through and made a muumuu. That was the very first thing I ever made from a sewing pattern, was a muumuu out of pink and white seersucker? Yes, seersucker fabric, which I actually have it here in my apartment. Let me show it to you. Okay, so this is the very first piece of clothing that I ever made from a sewing pattern. And honestly, looking at it now as an adult, it's really not bad, because let me tell you what, this is not a beginner-friendly pattern. It seems very simple, but the yoke is complicated, especially if you've never sewn before. And I put a zipper in. So kudos to me, I guess, or to my mom or whoever helped me with that. But that's the very first thing that I ever made. And pretty quickly after that, my mom did get me into sewing lessons. But then, life happens. I fell off of it for a really, really long time. And it was always in the back of my mind that I wanted to take up sewing again. It just, life was happening. I was like in school, going to college, then graduating from college and like working. And so eventually, when I was about like 27 or 28, I was like, okay, I really, really need to be serious about this. And I was like, I'm going to go buy a sewing machine. And so I went to Joann's and I got a Singer heavy duty, which is like, the most basic machine that you can get. And that was the tipping point where I was like, okay, I'm going to be for real about this. And it just felt so good to be sewing again that it was really easy for me to get back into it, because it was just like definitely the creative release that I needed, because there were many, many years where I didn't do anything creative. And I think that my creative people out there will totally relate when I say this, but I have to create or I kind of go crazy. So for me, it's kind of a non-negotiable. Like, I have to be creative, or it's just like that energy gets stuck inside of me in a very negative way. So that was kind of the tipping point where I was like, okay, I'm going to do this more seriously. And what I told myself was, I'm going to just get some like more complex sewing patterns and just work through them, and I will learn. And that's exactly what I did. And I think that that's still the advice I give to people now who are trying to learn how to sew, is get a pattern that will be difficult for you to do and just work through it. Google is your best friend. You can always Google what you don't know. And the instruction packet, normally, depending on the company that makes the pattern, is usually pretty good. So that's kind of how I started to dip my toe in. And then COVID came around. I've worked a variety of jobs in my life. My primary industry, I guess, that I've worked in is honestly retail. I worked in retail for 12 years in a variety of different ways. Like, I worked at the Apple store. I worked at a wedding dress store. Like, Say Yes to the Dress was my actual life. Like, that was the job that I had. So I've worked a lot of really random things. And I told myself that, which I think a lot of millennials can also relate to this, where it was like, I just need to get some kind of corporate job, because that will make me feel safe and secure. spoiler alert, I did not feel safe and secure in a corporate job. So 2019 came around and I was so burnt out from like the rat race of corporate stuff, which like I just was barely in like entry level corporate things. I just thought that that was going to be like so much better, and it's really, there's pros and cons to both, of course, but it's very soulless to work in corporate is what I'll say. Most of the time, not always, but most of the time. So 2019 came around and I was just horrifically burnt out, and I was like, I just don't think that I want to do this anymore. And so my plan was to take a brief hiatus from working, because I'd had a little bit of savings at that time and I was living with my boyfriend at the time as well. So I was going to take off a little bit of time, and in that time off, I was planning to get my certification in project management, which I did do. I do have my certification in project management, which happy to answer questions about that too, if y'all are curious. I did get that, and then as soon as I passed my test for my certification, COVID hit and everything locked down. So this is I have a very similar story to everyone else who started doing creative stuff during COVID, but you know, this is my version of that. So COVID hit and I was like, okay, I want to do something with sewing. Like that's what I really want to do. That's like, I feel really called to do this. And so I was like very involved with like going to shows, like drag shows in Austin, because I love drag. And I will say there's a big difference between people who are fans of Drag Race, the television show, and there are people who are fans of drag. I am a fan of drag. I like the art form of drag. I think that we have an amazing community here in Austin. I'm obviously biased, but we have an incredible drag performers here. And so I already was going to shows super regularly. And so I just started following everybody. And one day, a performer that I really looked up to posted on their story and was like, hey, can someone make this costume for me? And it was like a recreation of a Lil Nas X costume. And I just replied to the story and was like, I can. And thankfully, he trusted me to do it, even though I had never made something for another human being in my life. And it came out great, and he loved it, and it's just kind of been going from there. I haven't always known what I'm doing. I'm not trained at all. Most everything I know is self-taught. The only thing that I have gone to like seek out education for in sewing is pattern making. So I did do an online pattern making course through a school in Vancouver, which it was nice I was able to do it online, like fully at home. And that did teach me a lot about like making pattern blocks. And I do think that it was like a really good fundamentals lesson on like how patterns are made, so I understand more of like the science and math that goes into creating them. That being said, do I think you need to do something like that? Not really. I think it's up to you as far as like what you want to learn. And I know people who have gone to school to like learn all the ins and outs of sewing and all of that. Do whatever you think is best for you, but I just have been really successful in like basically self-teaching myself. But it's also because I'm very, very, I'm like a dog with a bone. Once I decide that I want to do something, it really takes a lot to stop me. And so tenacity is the word that I was thinking of. I'm extremely tenacious. So if you are wanting to learn, and this applies to anything, not just sewing, but if you want to learn anything, you just have to allow yourself to be bad at it and not give up. Those are the two things that you have to do, is just like, you're going to be bad at first. And you have to accept that and be okay with it. And then you have to not stop. And you will get better. It's just that you have to not give up before you've even given yourself a chance. That's kind of my sewing journey. And then, you know, every single project I take on, even for other people, I learn. So I'm always learning something new. I'm always challenging myself to make things I haven't made before, use tools and things I've never used before. So I'm just always trying to learn something new, which just makes me better and better at being a seamstress. Now for shoemaking, because I have a lot of people who ask me about this. For shoemaking, so I have wanted to make shoes since I was a child. I just had kind of made it up in my mind that it was just never going to happen. And then in like 2018, I was dating a guy who was like really into sneakers, and I kept noticing that there were like celebrities and professional athletes who would wear shoes that were customized. And I was like, how are they getting these customized shoes? And my boyfriend at the time was like, there's this guy called the Shoe Surgeon and he makes them. And I was like, what? And so I looked up the Shoe Surgeon, and he had a few videos on YouTube kind of explaining like what what his process was. And then in the video, he's like, we have classes. And I was like, oh my God, I'm doing that immediately. And so I did. I signed up for it to go at the end of 2019. So during that time when I had left work, I went to that shoemaking class in LA. And it was a really incredible experience just because you get to meet so many people who are interested in the same things as you, and you get to completely make a pair of shoes from scratch. And it's amazing. I really recommend it. Anyone who has the ability to and the desire to should go to a shoemaking class if you want to. It's just like, it's a whole different level of creativity and everything unlocked. So that was my first experience with it. And that was just for fun. I just wanted to do that for fun. Came back, and then not long after that, COVID started. So it was just like, that was just something that I wanted to do for fun. And then I started thinking about it more seriously. Again, when I had the thought of, I want to do something with sewing as like a business, I was like, well, I could do something with shoes as well. And so when I made that decision, I was like, well, I've only done one class. I want to go and do another one because, it had been about maybe 6 or 7 months since I'd gone to that class when I made the decision that I wanted to take this series more seriously. So I was like, I want to go to a different shoemaking class. At this time, I was still focused on sneakers because that's what I really wanted to do. And there's a big market for it. So I was like, that's what is going to be my niche, is making sneakers. So then I went to a different sneaker making class in San Diego with SD Custom Footwear. If I had to compare the two, what I would say is, if I were to pick to do one of those again through both Shoe Surgeon and SD Custom Footwear, I personally would pick SD Custom Footwear, really because I like San Diego much more than LA personally, but I also I learned more in different techniques that I did not learn in Shoe Surgeon. Shoe Surgeon, they're very, very, very professional and on it, and they have everything dialed in, whereas SD Custom Footwear, yes, they still have that stuff figured out, but it's a little bit more relaxed in how they teach and the techniques that they teach you there. So I was able to use machines I hadn't used before. I was able to ask questions that I wouldn't have been able to ask otherwise, because there were also more instructors with SD Custom Footwear as well. So there were a lot more people to ask things of. So that is the one that I would pick if I was choosing between those two. That's just my personal preference, but you cannot go wrong with either of them. So do that, and then as soon as I get home from SD Custom Footwear, I'm like, okay, I'm going to be for real about this. I ordered my big post bed machine right away. I ordered a lasting post. I ordered sole board. I ordered the foam I just ordered all the things that you need. And I was like, okay, I'm going to be for real about this. And I started just pumping out shoes at home. I just want to start making stuff so that way I have a portfolio of things I've made. And also I can get practice because I don't know. I've only made 2 pairs of shoes and I had to do this completely on my own because it is different making shoes at home on your own versus having an instructor there, obviously. Very different. Shoemaking is a whole different animal as far as the supplies that you need, which I'll touch on that in a minute. But I was not super comfortable selling shoes because I was like, I don't have as much experience with this as I do with making clothing. And so the clothing part started picking up and people were reaching out to me to make things. It's still not my full-time job, so I don't want y'all to get it twisted that I'm living full-time off of making costumes. I'm not, but it is steady. And I've made a name for myself in the city of Austin. So, I consider that to be successful. So garment stuff was taking off and I still wanted to do more with shoes. And I was like, okay, I feel really comfortable with sneakers, but this is not the end goal for me. I want to learn how to make other things as well. I wanted to learn how to make heels and just any kind of shoe that I see, I wanted to be able to make them. So then after that, I purchased the online program through a company called I Can Make Shoes. And that was really helpful. I learned how to make regular sandal style heels from their program. And that's completely online, completely at home. They also sell components. So if you're looking for shoe components, they have those as well. And that is a really good intro as well. That one you don't have the instructor with you. So you do have to do it on your own, but the instructions are really well laid out and it's all through video. So it's very easy to follow if you want to start with that first. If you're looking for resources to start making your own shoes, that is a really good first resource. So did that, learned how to make heels from that, and then I had been following Kira Goodey for a while on Instagram because she makes shoes. Of course, I was like, I want to follow someone who does this also, and I was like a huge admirer of her work. She's also made shoes for, I mean, runway shows, but also she's had shoes on Drag Race, which for me is like, you know, that's my touchstone because that's a show that I watch. So I had been following her for a while, and then she started offering classes in New York, and I was like, okay, I for sure have to do this. Like, there's no way that I'm gonna miss this opportunity. So signed up for that, did that in May of 2024, and it was so incredible. The only thing that still kind of holds me back, which I do intend on taking a class for this at some point, but the patterning, because patterning for shoes, it's very different than patterning for a garment because you have the heel height has to be taken into consideration, the shape of the toe, a lot of different things have to be taken into consideration, and it's a lot of math. So that part, I don't know how to like make patterns for a closed toe shoe completely from scratch. That's not something that I know how to do yet, but I will know eventually. So we'll get there. I know I said I would touch on kind of like supplies and things for shoemaking. The thing that starts to get complicated with shoemaking is that you have a last. So the last is a plastic or wooden mold that you use to actually make the shape of the shoe. It is the block that you use to wrap the leather around it to actually make it shoe shaped. That's your foundation. Now, the thing with the last is it has a set toe shape, it has a set heel height, and it has a set size. So those three things are set with the last. Now, you can do little things like you can tweak the shape of the toe and all that, but let's say you want to be able to make every size of a particular style of shoe. You have to have a last for every single size. So let's say if I wanted to start making, I have the Air Jordans. I only have an Air Jordan last that is my size. So if I wanted to make Air Jordan 1s for anyone else who was a different size, I'd have to order that last and order that pattern. Now, the patterns in the lasts are not cheap. The lasts themselves, I think from SD Custom Footwear, they're around like, I think 150 for the last. And the pattern, it's been a while since I've checked, but it's like $500 for the pattern. It's very difficult to create. So like I'm not knocking them for the price. It's just, it's pricey. So that's where the rub starts to come in when you want to make shoes for people that are a variety of sizes, and then if they have different requirements for heel height and things like that, because then it starts to get where you need very specialized equipment to make the things that you're trying to make. So that's why I'm still like on the small end with shoes, and I really only make them for myself. My goal is to eventually make them for others, but I'm really not there. I need more space. I need more education. But my goal is to really lean in and start making shoes much more regularly. I'm sure y'all saw that one of my last videos was a boot making video, and I'm really happy with how those boots came out, but it also took me 2 years to make them. It didn't take me a full 2 years. There was a big break in the middle where I didn't work on them at all, but it's just, it's time consuming. And I also just want to like build my confidence with shoemaking where I'm like pumping it out a little bit more quickly like I do with clothes, just because I'm much more confident making clothes than I am with shoes. So I know that was a lot of talking and a lot of rambling, and I hope I answered everyone's questions about like how I got into sewing and then into shoemaking. There's probably other questions that y'all have. Please feel free to leave them in the comments and I will answer them for y'all. And if there's anything else that y'all want to know about anything that I do, or if you want resources, happy to provide those, and I will see y'all on my next video. Bye.